What's up guys, my name is Tim, I'm the master mechanic at Zeitin BMW Mobile Services, and today we're doing a project of racetrack preparation series for this car. So it's going to be a bunch of videos, and in today's video we're doing full brake system upgrade. What it means is we're replacing the rotors, we're replacing the pads of course, but most importantly we're replacing the brake lines and the brake fluid. Why am I doing this? Well, the thing is, when I was on a racetrack, on this car, my brakes fading after 4, 5, 6 laps. And I also got a fault code for overheating the brake fluid. So no surprise there. Standard fluid, .4. We're going to be doing the module 660. So it has a boiling point of 620 degrees as far as I believe. Don't quote me on that. And the steel brake lines will not allow for the brake lines to expand. Like, you would think that this car would have the steel brake lines from the factory, but it doesn't. So that's the most important thing. The rotors. Why the rotors? Well, we do have the rotors that are drilled, and those are not the best for the track. So technically that's the points where the rotors break. So we're going to be replacing them with the a bit better performance rotors. They all ventilated, and I'll explain later down the video like what's going on and how it's all done. So let's get to this project. So here's the rotors that I got, and I never heard of this brand. It's Sebro. It's made in Germany, but our supplier always gets parts from Germany. So those are the only ones that are not drilled that I could find, and let's open it up. They are directional, so they ventilated rotors, and there's a left and right. The rear ones only sold in pairs. Let's see, and we will see the difference between, oh, it's pretty light actually. So this one is left, driver's side. You can see this rotor is marked left. That's the difference between them. It's not drilled, but it's ventilated. That's the ventilation, where all the ventilation happens. What happens through those holes right here, they look cool, but it's only to get rid of the brake dust basically. So the brake dust goes into the holes, and they always get clogged up and everything, but the ventilation is happening in the middle of the rotor right here while the car is moving. So those are, in my opinion, the better rotors, especially for the track. We're going to install those and see what happens. So that's the rotors. We have exactly the same ones for the front. Let's continue with the other parts. Here we have the brake lines, and the funny thing is they're all the same, pretty much. There is no difference between them. That was surprising to me, because BMW brake lines like this, they are different. The front and back, they're kind of shorter, longer. All those, all the same, which is perfect. Like, it's a great design in my opinion. You don't have to worry about it. Let's just replace them all. Here's the brake line. It's all rubber. This one has the metal jacket and the silicone covering all over it. That's what I want to see on this car. So it's completely steel. Not completely steel brake lines, but they are not expendable brake lines. So that's good stuff. And of course we're going to be doing the pads. The reason for it, like, I've had a few track days on those pads. They've been overheated pretty good. I'll show you the heat damage basically on those ones. Why not? Like, I mean, doing the whole brake system, why not do the brake pads? Let's get to it. So we're in the back of the car. It's the front, driver's side. First, we're going to be removing the pads. In order to do that, it's pretty simple. The Porsche did a great job with that. We just remove that pin, just like this. Don't lose it. And then we will hammer out this pin right here. Well, you don't have to. You can push the spring. So this metal part right here is the spring that holds the tension to this pin. If you push the spring, there is no tension. You can remove it, and then you need to separate the pads and remove them. And after that, we'll just go for caliper removal. If you're just replacing the pads, you don't need to, but we will need it. So the caliper removal right here, those are big Torx bolts, like Torx 55, I would say 55 to 60, one of those. And we do have 2 bleeding screws on the caliper, one right here one on the other side. Those are 11 millimeters. And in order to remove the brake line, we have another 11 millimeter right here to loosen it from the steel brake line that goes to the front of the car. That's another cool thing. I like that it's not different size. It's 11 millimeter and that's 11 millimeter. Awesome. We don't need anything else. We do have 11 millimeter right here from the caliper to the brake line. So that's the whole area of work. And I do have my oil catch can right here too, because we're going to be draining the brake fluid basically from all the calipers and removing all the brake fluid. I did get in total 1.5 liters of brake fluid. It should be enough. If not, we'll get some more. The process is not very complicated. It's not exactly a DIY video, so it's a track prep and I explain why we do it. Hope you guys enjoy it. So here's how everything looks disassembled. We got the rotor, the caliper with the line attached to it, but this one is a still line. As you can see, we don't need to replace that. That's perfectly fine. I do have the pads right here, and I'll show you where the signatures of overheating. Those Torx 55 bolts for the caliper, the spring, and this bar with the lock pin. So everything is in here. So let's compare the difference and why do we replace this rotor. It is a ventilated rotor, as you can see right here in the middle. It's definitely ventilated, but if you are going on track pretty often and you want to improve your braking and you want to be on a safer side, those rotors crack right here where the holes are, because as you can see they drilled, so the material is not as durable as this one, because obviously this one will not crack. This is more durable and better braking. We have more surface where the brake pad contacts the rotor, so there is no holes. It might be a little bit more dusty for the city use, but for the track use, that's the way to go. And this is the car that's technically, well, it wasn't built for the track, but I like it more on the track. It lives there. The engine sings there. It's perfect. It's an amazing feeling. Let's move on to the pads. And the rotors are cool. The whole process is not that complicated and doesn't take long, like literally 20 minutes. Although for the brake line removal, we have on top 11 millimeter and at the bottom near the caliper, this one is 10 millimeter. So just so you know, because I thought they both 11, the bottom one is 10. The pads, how do I know I overheated them? Well, first of all, they started to make noise. And sometimes it's about the brake pad material, sometimes it's about the pad. Look at I've had 2 track days with this pad, so I would say 1.5. As you can see, like those cracks, that's the sign of overheated pads. It's sort of like discolored a little bit. There's still plenty of the pad, but not plenty. Let's compare it to the new one. But that's 50% left. Those are ATE pads. I'm going to be using ATE again. I don't see the point of going completely track compound. Let's say there's plenty of the pad left. Like they barely touched the surface, but they were overheated and they are making noise. So as you can see, the new pad is completely even surface and it's much better. There is no cracks, so hopefully this will not make noise. The second pad is the same goes to this one. Crack right here, everywhere. So it's like not the best, but I like that this pad's actually 1.5 days barely worn off, so that's a good thing. I like it. We do have ATE. I like ATE since It manufactures the calipers and pads for BMW OEM, and since I'm BMW technician, I stick to what I know. Those are Brembo calipers on Porsche, but in my experience, I've used Brembo pads before on BMW though, and a lot of dust, quick to overheat, didn't like it very much, so ATE is a great brake pad material. Right here there's a brake line with the spring all over it, but as you can see, this one is a rubber line. Let's compare it close up. Here is the deal. You can see how easily it is to bend this one because it's rubber without anything metal in here. The temperature's reaching too high. The rubber, what it does, it expands. Like you, of course you don't see it, but you definitely feel like your brakes are fading away. So, and that's not a great feeling, especially on track. I want my brakes to be able to stop the car at all times and not just 5 laps. I mean 10, 20, 30. The car can probably not handle 30, but 10 to 20 laps at least. So the brake lines, the most important component of this job, and the brake fluid. Everything else, yeah, it's cool and all, but if I would be on a very tight budget, I would just go with the brake lines and the brake fluid. Because if your brake lines and brake fluid are decent and track ready, you will not experience the problem with brakes overheating, but you're still gonna have the rotors that are not as durable as this ones, and the braking power is just a little bit less than it could be. But in general, that would be anyways the first step. Brake lines, steel lines for any car, doesn't matter. And the brake fluid with the higher boiling point. That's all it takes to improve your braking performance on track. And look at how pretty that is. Amazing. I love it. But there are things I don't love. Those bolts. I mean, a Phillips screwdriver for that? Seriously? Like, can we do better? Like Allen key, at least? Other things. Careful with the brake fluid. Brake fluid is it's a nasty fluid. I hate it the most. From all the automotive fluids, the brake fluid, and then maybe the next one is transmission fluid, but the brake fluid is definitely the first. I don't like it. It eats through everything, so during the process, like, it's gonna be leaking all over the place, and make sure you catch it all and wipe everything out, because it's gonna smell. Here's the exhaust. It catches on the exhaust. It's not gonna burn. It's not gonna catch on fire, but it's gonna be smelling a little bit here and there. Now I'm gonna be, well, I keep those open for now. We're gonna replace the other rear, and after that, when we do the front, of course, we can bleed the system finally. We'll get rid of all the brake fluid and go from there. So also, it's the first time in this car's, well, in my ownership, like, I've seen the brake pad wear sensor was disconnected, so I put it back in where it's supposed to be. I'd rather know if I have brakes or not. You can always check, yes, but you cannot check the other side. And the Porsche brake sensors, it's split in two, so one for the inside pad and one for the outside pad, which is great in my opinion. Unlike on BMWs, let's say, it's only one sensor for the inside pad in the back and one sensor for the inside pad for the front. So it's just 2 sensors total for the whole car. Here you have basically 8 sensors, which is great. Love it. BMW could use some knowledge from here. Although for the regular cars, doesn't really make much sense. So here's the beauty. I love how it looks. Everything's solid, everything's good. Just gonna do more wiping out and move to the next one, and we'll do the front and see what happens there. Moving to the front of the car, what do we have here? We have pretty large calipers. Those are 6-piston calipers. In the back we have 4-piston calipers. I don't like this design. Like, comparing to BMW, I'm sorry guys, I'm going to be comparing Porsche to BMW all the time. Who did it better? BMW in this instance, because BMW's M brakes, they don't have this part of caliper, and you can simply remove, like you had in the Porsche in the back. Remove the pads, replace them. Here, in order for me to replace the pads, I have to remove the caliper, which is not a big deal. Like, plenty of cars, and BMW as well, with not M brakes but the regular brakes, you have to remove the caliper to replace the pads. But that's not the catch. The catch is here we have the metal line coming from the caliper. It's a brake line basically. When I move the caliper, it bends the line, and I definitely don't want to do that. So good thing for me right now, I'm gonna be placing the brake lines as well. So I'm gonna remove the steel brake line from the caliper and remove it totally so I don't damage it at all. But the thing is, like, if I just going for a regular brake job and I have to bleed the brakes all the time while I'm doing it, like, that's, for me, that's nonsense. Because if you don't push the car hard, like, you basically don't need to change your brake fluid ever. Controversially to a lot of people thinking like, oh, my car says every 15,000 miles. No, no. I had cars with 20 years, 30 years running on the same brake fluid, but yeah, nothing happens, still brakes, everything good. So what are we gonna do? Of course, it's the same brake line because they all the same size. Replace the rotor, replace the pads, replace the brake line, and then bleed the whole thing. I'm only gonna be bleeding it in the very end. When you're bleeding the system, you can't just bleed one caliper or 2 calipers. You have to bleed the whole thing every single time. That's why it's frustrating to me why they put this kind of design in here, because, like, seriously, I'm just replacing the front pads. Like, why do I need to bleed the whole system again? Everything's taken apart. I definitely don't like the line coming out of the caliper that we have to disconnect even just for basic pad replacement, but that's what happens. I had 1.5, maybe 2 days on these pads, and look at the difference between those and the ones in the back as far as you remember. Look at that. So the front is about 30-40% left. A lot of difference. I see the heat damage in here. I do see the cracks right here as well, and the way they wear out. Those are hella Paget. Worked pretty good. Those are Techstar pads. Once again, they were OEM for BMW. The one thing I don't like about the Techstar is usually they are dusty. I'm not sure if it's going to be the case on the Porsche, but on BMWs they are a little bit dusty, but quite a good brake pad, so we'll see what happens. And the tricky part is, like, you have to remove the caliper. If you don't disconnect this line, it is possible to replace the pads in the front, but you're going to be bending the metal line, and I really don't like to do that. Like, the first time I did the brake pads, I didn't disconnect the line, so I did bend it. It moves, it's okay, but it makes the job complex to replace the pads. Once it's like this, like, that's not that hard. There is a spring inside the caliper, and my mistake, it's not 6-piston caliper, it's 4-piston, the same as the back. It's just bigger. We have directional rotors right here as well, the same as this one. So this is the ventilated rotor as well, but this one also drilled, and it's not as durable as I said before. So I'm going to be putting all back together, the other side as well, and we finally will be able to bleed the system. So that's the complete brake job for this car. It's like everything you possibly can do for the brakes on this car. Well, except replacing for a bigger brake kit and whatever. Doesn't matter. The most important, once again, is the brake fluid and the brake lines. Now all the pads, rotors, lines, everything is replaced, and there's a final step, refilling the brake fluid reservoir, and I will also be getting rid of the whatever is left in the system. I personally prefer doing it old school method, and even though we have two bleeding screws on each caliper, like just open both of them, put the hoses on and dip them in the brake fluid and just push the brake pedal. That's it. Like, it just flushes everything out. Just make sure I use the plastic bottle that I can see through, and you can use the see-through hoses. I just use the regular vacuum lines. It's not that big of a deal. I don't need to see the clean fluid. Like, you will definitely see it once you flushed it all out. The whole system, I don't remember how much it takes, but I do have, as I said before, 1.5 liters of this Motul RBF 660. This is specifically a racing brake fluid. It has a really high boiling point. I think it's 620 degrees Fahrenheit. 320 degrees Celsius, it's a dry boiling point, and typical boiling point is 325 degrees Celsius. So it all says on the packaging 608 Fahrenheit and 617 Fahrenheit. So this is very high. It's not going to be boiling on the track. So that's the whole point. Regarding the street use, there is no difference. So if you guys want to like upgrade your brake system for the streets, all of this doesn't matter. It just doesn't do anything. You will not see any better performance. This only works for me for the racetrack. That's where you have high-speed corners, there's constant braking and accelerating. This is where this system actually makes sense. If you're driving on the streets, you don't even need to change the brake fluid ever. Just like you think you go fast and you brake fast, it's not that big of a deal. It's not a track. If you've never been, you don't know. So don't do it for street driving. If you're willing to go to the track and you do it pretty often, like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk about the pricing a little bit. In regards of pricing, so we have those technically performance rotors, but I don't even consider them performance rotors. It's just a better version, let's put it this way. The rear is sold in pairs, and we have, remember, I do have the wholesale prices, so I would say the retail would be around $300 for a pair of rear rotors. Not bad for the Porsche, actually. The front, they sold separately, and that about $200 each. So let's say it's about $700 for the rotors. The pads, the back ones, I really like those. Those are ATE, and I like those pads. Those are about $80 to $100 for the set, of course. And the front one is Techstar, and those are about $200, $220, something like that. The genuine Porsche would be about $260 to $80. Like, not that big of a difference, but I don't see any big difference in regards of who manufactures the brake pads. What else do we have? We have the brake lines, steel brake lines. Those are actually pretty cheap. It's about, the retail would be about $130, $140 for the whole set, so that's cheap. And the brake fluid is about $25, $30 per half a liter, so half a quart approximately. So we got 3 of those, and that's about $100 something. So you can combine all of it. In regards of, is it expensive, is it not for this car, I'd say it's pretty decent. In comparison, once again, to BMWs, I'd say, yeah, it's probably even cheaper than M3, let's say. Great car, love it. So we'll see how the brakes perform. And once again, I'm not gonna be testing them on the street. I'm gonna drive definitely to see if there is any issues. That's pretty much it. But all we're doing this for, it's the track day is coming, so we'll test it there. I'll give you my review. Brake system is completely updated. Here's the brake fluid. This one is from round 1 bleeding, and here's the round 2. So you can obviously see the difference. This is much lighter one, since it's on pretty much almost all the new fluid in there. I had 3 bottles, 500 milliliters each, so I used 2.5 of the second one to fill it up. The basics behind the bleeding, like we didn't show it, but you need 2 people for it. The way I use it, open the screws, both of them at the same time, pump the brakes, close the screws, go from wheel to wheel. We have the dynamic stability control, well, ABS unit on the front driver's side. So you start with the furthest wheel, it's passenger side, and then passenger side rear, then driver side rear, then passenger side front, and the last wheel will be driver side front. So once again, this is one of the videos of track prep series. We're going to be doing more stuff with this car as long as we go with development of basically like what works, what doesn't. Like this, definitely a big one that's braking. I hope you guys liked it, and let me know in the comments what do you think. For parts references, I can definitely provide the part numbers if you wish to have so. Comment below, like the video, subscribe, share the video, and let me know if you want to see more of this content, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't break your cars.